Hey, Richard here, Tennis Hacker. In this video, I want to help you to improve the spacing on your one-handed backhand to help you set up in better positions, because this is one of the most important parts of hitting a high quality stroke, and it's an area where a lot of players struggle. Now, the way that I'm going to help you is by showing you a few different footwork flow patterns that you can work on and practice. And by practicing them and turning them into a habit, your body's just going to automatically start to use them when you're out on court. You'll just be able to set up in better positions, better spacing from the ball, and that's going to lead to a much cleaner, higher quality one-handed backhand. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, it'd be great if you give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I'd really appreciate it if you could do that as well. So when it comes to spacing on the one-hander, it's obviously very important. If you get too close, you're going to be jammed. If you get too far away, you're going to be reaching. We need to try and arrive at the optimal position set up and be as balanced as we can, ready to hit our shots. Obviously, the hard part about it is our opponents aren't normally very cooperative, and every single ball that we deal with is going to be different, and that means there's no right or wrong way, there's no perfect way to set up for a shot. We need to have different combinations of footwork patterns available to us that we can use at will in the right situation in order to be able to set up in the right position. So what I'm going to be doing is showing you 3 individual footwork steps that we're going to practice in isolation, and then we're going to put them together in different combinations. And when you first do them, if you haven't done them like this before, it's going to feel weird, it's going to feel awkward, but you've got to get repetitions in. Basically, go through the different stages of learning, because when you first learn something, it's weird and it's awkward. You do it enough times, you automate it, it becomes a habit, and once it's a habit, then it's yours, and then it can just start to happen on court, providing your visual system's functioning at a high enough level. But once you've got the movement patterns, then your footwork is going to be so much better, your spacing is going to be so much better, and your one-hander is going to be a much better shot. Now, in terms of the one-hander, obviously, we can hit one-handers from an open stance, but most of the time we're going to be hitting from a neutral or from a closed stance. But what I want you to think about is kind of arriving, being balanced on this left leg. So all the combinations that we're going to be doing are to get you set up on your left leg as a right-hander, the outside leg, because it's from that left leg that you then step in and drive. So, you know, you've got to try and mark your spacing with this leg, but then you can make final adjustments. So I could step in, I could step forwards, or I can step all the way across myself. But the power comes initially from that hip. That's what starts the kind of the racket drop and throwing the racket forwards. So what we're going to be working on is arriving in this position, basically being set in our unit turn, loaded up on this outside leg, ready to then hit the ball. So that's what the combinations are going to be built around. So let's start by looking at our steps in isolation. We've got 3 steps. We have a crossover step, which is a court coverage step that we use to cover a lot of ground. And then we've got 2 adjustment steps. We've got a shuffle step and we've got a rhythm step. So 3 total steps. The crossover step is normally the first step that you're going to do after a split step, because we're going to be covering a lot of ground. So as the name suggests, I'm crossing over, so my right leg is crossing over my left leg, and generally as I'm doing that, I'm going to be doing a unit turn. Now, what's going to happen a lot of the time, obviously your split step, you should be landing nice and low and wide and stable on the balls of your feet just after your opponent's made contact, so then you can react more quickly. But from there's normally going to be a drop step where the ball of the foot drops back underneath this hip, so then I can start to push across. We can do it in slightly different ways, but normally if you're trying to cover a lot of ground, that's going to be what happens. So that's what we'll be working on, the crossover step, but then arriving balanced on this outside leg. And obviously, as I'm doing it, I'm getting my grip change as I move into setting up in right position, because obviously from there, I'm now in this position. Now I can just step in and hit through. I can hit an open stance if I want, or I can step across and hit from a closed stance. But we've got to load off that outside leg first. So that is step 1, the crossover step. Step 2 is going to be the shuffle step. So the shuffle step, as the name suggests, you're shuffling. So now I'm pushing from the right leg and my left leg is shuffling. So this is one that you can do from the split step. So I might do a shuffle step after my split step. So then I can hit through. If I'm going to be hitting a ball that's a little bit closer, or I could do a crossover step into a shuffle step just to kind of finalize my position and just adjust and fine tune that spacing. But that's the shuffle step, driving off the right leg, pushing the left leg, arriving balanced, and then hitting. And the final step that we've got is going to be a rhythm step. And a rhythm step is what you see a lot from the pros, little steps where they're checking their speed, they're finalizing that adjustment, so they're going, but much more quickly than that. So could be 3, so could be 5, could be 7. But it's just 3, generally 3, 5 or 7. For me, most of the time when I'm using this, I use 5, but the idea is often you're going to be bolting this on to the end of a crossover step to slow yourself down. So, and just doing a few little rhythm steps just to finalize that spacing and get you ready to load up for your shot. Like so. So there, the 3 steps that we've got: crossover, shuffle, and rhythm. And then we're going to work on our combinations, and we've got 4 combinations to go for. The first one is going to be crossover into shuffle step. So crossover, shuffle, and then that loading as you set up, so you can drive into your stroke through your left hip. So crossover, shuffle, load. Crossover, shuffle, load. Crossover, shuffle, and then load. So that's combination 1. Combination 2, crossover into rhythm steps. And we can do this with 3, 5, 7. So that was 3, crossover, and hit. And remember, this one's all about checking your speed. And then crossover, and hit. The third one is going to be shuffle into rhythm. Shuffle into rhythm. And again, we've got the different combinations. And the final one is going to be a blend of all 3. It's going to be crossover step, shuffle step, rhythm steps. Crossover, shuffle, rhythm. Crossover, shuffle, rhythm. Okay, so there are 4 different combinations that we're going to be working on. And as I practice those, I'm looking down the other end of the court because that's where the ball is going to be coming from. But when you're in the initial stages of learning this, you might need to look down at your feet at first. You might need to look where you're going first as kind of a safety feature, but eventually you want to build up so you can do these combinations just automatically and habitually while you're facing down the other end. Okay, so there are different steps and are different blends that we can work on to really improve the spacing for your one-handed backhand. Now, you might never do it in exactly the way that I've just showed you at the end. You might never do a crossover step into a shuffle step into a rhythm step, and that's okay. You're training and automating these movements so your brain can just start to blend them together as needed, because it's just important to understand that if you can't perform a certain movement or a footwork pattern without the ball, you don't suddenly develop the ability when the ball's there. So you're going to build up repetitions with these movements, and then your brain will just be able to start to use them automatically. And what you'll have probably seen when I was doing a couple of the demonstrations, and I'm talking and not concentrating on the footwork that I'm doing, I was trying to do a crossover step, and then I kind of automatically went into a bit of a blend. So it was like a blend between a crossover step and a shuffle step. and that's entirely okay. That's what you're trying to do, but you have to learn the movements first, and then you can start to kind of develop them and be a little bit more flowy with them. So if you work on this stuff, I'm very confident that it's going to make a big difference in terms of your spacing, and that is really going to help your one-handed backhand overall. But there's something that goes along with the footwork, and this is an area that a lot of players really struggle with as well, because in order to get optimal spacing from the ball, one of the big pieces of the puzzle is being able to accurately judge the distance and depth. And that might sound silly, but most tennis players' visual systems don't function at a sufficiently high level to allow them to actually predict where the ball's going once their opponents hit it, and to read the distance and depth, especially when they're moving to the ball and doing all these different things. And that is an area that you might need to work on to really fix the spacing, in addition to training the movement patterns. If that's something you would like to learn more about, it's one of the big areas that I work with tennis players in. I use brain-based training to help players basically improve eye-to-hand, eye-to-foot coordination, improve focus and concentration, basically improve their tennis skill level. I've created a masterclass that's going to go into a lot more detail about it. I'll place a link up there, and I'll place a link down in the description so that you can check that one out. And if you're interested in potentially working with me, I've got a whole program where I teach players this sort of thing. But if you sign up for that class, it's going to give you more detail about it and explain the next steps that are involved. If you are up for another video right now, then I highly advise this one, because it's actually going to take you through a couple of the vision assessments that you can do to figure out if there's issues with the visual skills that are important for spacing. So I think you'll really enjoy that one.